Well, thanks for staying with News at Prime tonight. Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi says travellers returning to South Africa will be the biggest challenge facing the borders during the festive season. According to COVID-19 regulations, travellers intending to visit the country are expected to produce a COVID-19 test not older than 74 hours from the country of departure. To speak to us on these regulations, we're joined by Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Dr. Motsoaledi, good evening and thank you so much for your time. Firstly, before we get into some of the travel issues that people need to be aware of, let's talk about the problems that you've been experiencing at Home Affairs offices.
Good evening, Kathy. Good evening to the listeners and viewers out there. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, Kathy, look, you may remember that when COVID-19 started, the lockdown started in March this year. There were certain restrictions which we did in Home Affairs offices. We could not provide all the services because we were scared of crowds, huge crowds of people who might get infected. But the few who were there, we had restrictions, like social distancing in the queues, even inside Home Affairs or even outside, where people, because the queues can actually snake through just like election queues. But we also made sure that nobody enters the Home Affairs office without a mask, and people have to be sanitized at the door. So when we moved to level 1, bit by bit, people were starting to lose that and ignore it. And that is worrying us. And they were coming in large numbers now that is open for all the services. And so we were worried that Home Affairs offices may become super spreader events. You know?
At this point, part of what you have seen is a breakdown of the system on some days that has led to delays for those who are in queues at the offices. But there also seems to be a longer turnaround time when it comes to the kind of services that people want to access.
Yeah, Casey, you know, it was very bad yesterday. After we agreed last week that all the senior officials, starting with the minister, right up to level of chief directors, must all go out to Home Affairs offices, specifically because we were worried about this issue of COVID-19 regulations, which are no longer being obeyed. We were worried that very soon we'll hear about infections emerging from Home Affairs offices. That's why we went out. I was here in Pretoria, my deputy was in Durban, DG was in Cape Town. Just when we arrived, the system went down. And for the whole 2 hours, I had to rush to Centurion because that's where the whole room is, where all the technicians and engineers sit to make sure that our offices work. And so we saw it firsthand, what happened when the system goes down. And indeed, they were down for 1.5 hours. And by the time they came back, you know, it was quite tiresome. But fortunately, by 4 o'clock, they've already cleared most of the people who are there. So I even have to call the CEO of SITA, the State Information Technology Agency, to see it personally, what happened in the offices and on the ground when the system goes down. And he came, he actually appreciated, and he found that some of them are slower than they should be because they are now the providers of technology. You know, he said they are going to have to do something about it because they are the ones who provide Home Affairs with the technology to run its systems.
When it comes to the general systemic challenges that many of those that you would have interacted with have raised with you, and I know that you've already said that you're going to be launching your own investigation into some of the systemic challenges. Which are the services that people are experiencing the biggest delays with?
The biggest is systems down, Kathy. They go down quite often, and there are many reasons. For instance, the broadband from SITA, load shedding, but also when people cut cables and steal them. All those affect Home Affairs. You know, Home Affairs, unlike all the other departments, depends more on electronic systems than any. Without them, you simply cannot do our work because most of our system now has been modernized. They are no longer manual like in the past. Because in the past, it will take you about 6 weeks or even more to apply for a passport. Now, today, because of the systems, it can take 5 days to 13 days for you to get a passport. Even for IDs, people will tell you it takes about 2 weeks or so after applying. That's because we are using these electronic systems. But their downside case is that when they go down and they just switch off, it becomes a big problem. If you go back to manual, people wait for months and for months while things are still being couriered from rural districts and all that. So that's why we call SECA, because they provide us with electronic systems for them to see and see how they improve them. That is the biggest complaint that people have got on the ground when you visit Home Affairs offices. The other problems we can cope with them, like I said, social distancing, coming up with a mask and all that. And the problems, of course, of unemployed people who wake up in the morning, unemployed and sometimes homeless people who wake up 4 o'clock in the morning to go and book a space in the queue and sit in that queue when they know that they are looking for no service and try to sell the space to somebody else who comes later. Those are the problems, and we've asked immigration officials, because our immigration offices are still closed, to go there and try to check for those people. And yesterday, I was with a couple of immigration officials to try and achieve that.
One of the other, areas that is going to come under heavy pressure is, of course, the borders, as we expect increased travel during this period. Speak to me, Minister, about the COVID-19 certificates that people are expected to present going out of the country, but most importantly, coming back in, and in particular, the fake certificates.
You are right, Casey. The problem is not going out. Those who are going out are problems. Hello?
I'm still here.
Oh, I'm hearing somebody in the background, Casey.
Oh, okay. I don't know where that might be coming from, Minister, but we can still hear you loud and clear on my end.
Yes. As you are saying, the problem is not people who are going out now for holidays. Those are a problem of the neighboring countries they are visiting. Our biggest headache is going to be in January when people come back. Even those who come from the neighboring countries who are working in South Africa, when they come back, because we are going to demand a 72-hour, not 74 hours, by the way, 72-hour COVID-19 certificate. We are even trying to help them by introducing a rapid antigen test, which you can do and get the results in 15 minutes at the border. We are trying to do that. But we are very much worried because it's going to be a nightmare. And we are trying to plan with the Department of Health how we are going to achieve that.
It's a big problem because one of the things that it's also likely to do is delay then the movement of people across the border, because that 15-minute waiting period is a long time. So effectively you're having to designate about half an hour at least for people to get through the border.
Well, if they don't want to wait at the border, then they must prepare for that 72-hour certificate. You know, Kate, when I met my counterpart from Zimbabwe, Minister Kazembe of Home Affairs in Zimbabwe, he brought along the Deputy Minister of Health, because he said the issues of COVID-19 are more in the health sector than in Home Affairs, and that's why he brought the Deputy Minister. And he said in Zimbabwe they want a certificate that is less than 48 hours. He made a call that people who are not having emergency travel, who are traveling for leisure and all the other businesses, they know on time that they are going to travel, so they must prepare for those certificates. It's only emergencies where we'll allow them in. But anyway, we never stopped emergencies, even when we went to log level 5. So he made that call that people must plan. If a person doesn't want to come and wait for a long time at the borders, then they must plan. But for them just to say, no, I'm just going to come and push my way through, we're not going to agree. I've already heard some people say, no, the test is too expensive, we won't be able to afford it, we are just going to push through the borders illegally. That's something that we are going to try our best to fight, because here we are balancing between people's rights and lives and livelihoods, but we are also balancing with life, because you will know what happens when people who are infected just comes through. You are aware already that we are already in a second wave and it's very bad, and we can't just allow it to go wire. That's why even the president yesterday said it very clear that if we don't do things in a particular way, for some people, this will be the last Christmas. We don't want this to be the last Christmas or the last New Year for some people. We want all of us to be alive. So people must know that we are not doing it against them. We are doing it because we want to save their lives and save the lives of other people.
The issue of cost is a big one, Minister. And are you concerned about the fact that if you have these escalating costs and escalating processes to be able to legally pass through the border, that it's going to push people then to cross the border illegally? We already have a problem of porous borders. And how are you going to be monitoring or even changing that situation during this period?
Well, Casey, it looks like you are saying the only alternative is to open for them because it's expensive. Yes, it's expensive to stay alive from COVID-19. It definitely is. This government has to spend millions and millions to make people stay alive from COVID. And it's expensive, so there's nothing we can do. It's a pandemic that is there that needs money and resources to resolve. So when we say we want COVID-19 certificate, it has to be produced, unfortunately. And that's why we compromise by trying to bring a rapid antigen test. Even if the rapid antigen test they can't tolerate, then a person must not cross our border, mustn't come into the country. I'm afraid it's just like that. You can't say, no, the antigen test takes too long, I can't wait for 15 minutes. The PCR test at 72 hours is too expensive. I just want to come in as I am and bring any disease. It can't work like that, kid. It can't. We must meet each other halfway.
All right. Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi is the Home Affairs Minister. We're going to leave it there for tonight. So a lot of planning, as you heard, needs to go into those who are preparing to travel over this festive season, especially if you're traveling within the SADC region. So accommodate the days that you'll need to take for getting tested and having those necessary documents available in time to be able to cross the borders.